Hi everyone, in this section I'm going to talk about how to deal with clients who don't take responsibility for their health and well-being. And the clients might come in all sorts of in forms or, in different disguises. So the reason why I'm doing this particular session, even though it's something that I do cover a little bit in some of my work and my training. I seen a post last week where basically someone put a comment in someone else's post and was more or less saying, it's not up to me to question my doctor or question this or question that. It's there. It was almost like they were giving their power over to the doctor, just the doctor knows best. Okay, and the comment was a bit of a rant, but there was other things in this comment. The person implied, like for example, I take a cigarette and I don't ask what's in the cigarette. So I think it was a bit of tongue-in-cheek in it, or a wee bit just to try and push the person's buttons, the comment that it was put on someone else's post. But the reality is, many of us live in countries which could be classed as nanny states, and we live in societies that actually in many ways encourage us to hand over our power and our responsibility for many areas of our life to someone else, and particularly our health. Now, I am not saying that a doctor's role, of course, is extremely valid, and there's always times in our life where we maybe need the support of a doctor, and they have valuable skills, valuable knowledge and things like that. And there is different medical practitioners. I know I've had to go to many, but the reality is, and I have to be honest here, is that I learned the hard way not to give my responsibility in relation to my health, give my power over to other people. Now, you might think I'll contradict by saying there's other times I've went to therapists and looking for certain help. And I think, again, what I'm trying to explain here is that there's fine lines. We all come in with different skills, different levels of awareness, different types of knowledge and insights, and we have different types of challenges mentally, emotionally, physically, and even spiritually. And we all often, maybe need extra help or support, especially when we are very disconnected with our own inner guidance. And the reality is that the biggest thing you can do to empower others is to help them to tune into their inner guidance and, make decisions and seeking the right help. But the reality is also that many people genuinely believe, for example, a doctor or any health professional or even a therapist or coach or healer is there to take away their problem. And they often don't take ownership from the things that as part of their, that they've been responsible for certain things. And what I mean by, there is some things that are very obvious, and there's some things that people do every single day and do not take any responsibility for those decisions. And those can be lifestyle decisions. It can be what they consume, what they smoke, drink, eat, even what you mentally consume, emotionally consume. And yes, again, some people might have a vulnerability. They may have challenges around overeating or other, eating disorders, and they may need a little bit of support. And seeking support and help is completely different than actually handing over full power and in many ways responsibility and control over to someone else. There's a complete difference. The reality is that we come in with our bodies, right? We come in and it's our responsibility to look after that body, just like look after our mind, emotions, and as I said, our spirit. And yes, there's some things that we all have challenges with. That's part of living the human experience. But if a client comes in and expects you to be the magic wand and take all the problems away and doesn't take self-responsibility, does not want to be proactive in their own health and well-being, you have a problem. Because the client and the client and therapist relationship is not like a co-partnership, or it's not, you're not working together. They're handing your power over to you. Now, I remember when I started going down the holistic route, I was someone that had the bizarrest medical challenges. I'd also, and I think I should add this before I continue, I also had lots of situations in my life which it could have been potentially even more dangerous, right? I'll give you for example, right? So I had lots of unusual, experiences. It's not normal to have a hole in the back of your eye. It's not a normal thing to be mercury poisoned in the way that I was mercury poisoned and things. But it was interesting because my life story was about many incidents where it could have been much worse, and I'll give you some examples. So my mum, before I was born, was exposed to certain toxins, and she always worried if that was contributed to my health. She was exposed to different things that are probably now regarded as very dangerous. Before I was born, she had basically a hot rod put up her cervix and I mean, quite barbaric, something that wouldn't be done now. When I was a young girl, or a baby, or an infant, I was given a medicine that basically caused lots of problems with the teeth, so I ended up having to get all my teeth out when I was just starting school, which led to lots of overcrowding and lots of other issues. And obviously I developed a condition in my face and my bones and my muscles, which could be congenital, could be something else. But I also, when I started school, and I was in maybe not started school, but I was in school a couple of years, my parents were approached by I don't know what you'd call it, the school doctor or nurse, to see if my mum and dad were open to giving me it would be growth hormones because I was so small. And my mum and dad refused. There was myself and another little boy were given that, this, and my mum and dad went no because it was basically experimental. Now, interestingly enough, that very type of therapy, or whatever you would call it, ended up causing many people. They ended up with all sorts of complications, and I'm sure it was mad cow's disease, right? And there was an incident where my mum and dad, they had the awareness and understanding not to give over again power to someone else, and not just to use me as a guinea pig or to something that they couldn't possibly know the long-term results. When I became a teenager, I was very, very self-conscious of my face, and I was always offered the opportunity to have plastic surgery, right? And I went to see about getting plastic surgery, right? Now, I was a typical teenager. I wasn't happy about how I looked, but I was horrified of how they approached it, right? And one of the things that they wanted to do, and thank God I didn't do it, was they wanted to put silicone above, they wanted to put silicone pads and silicone in my face. And what they were going to do was basically break the nose and the different things. And I won't go into the horrors of it, but believe me, plastic surgery, that would be about 35 years ago, was not what it's like now. It wasn't just a little tuck or a tuck here. They actually cut and they pulled your face, but whatever. It was quite horrible. Now, interesting, those silicone implants that they put in, years later were actually falling in people's boobs, melting, causing cancer and toxicity. And loads of things happened to me where mainstream medicine wanted to give me things that could be highly dangerous. And I was given things, quite a few, even tests that were done on me were highly toxic. And it was a very, very valuable lesson, because most of these incidents had such a detrimental effect on my health, and it was like a domino effect. And it made me really understand about how important it is to take self-responsibility, and to also remember, no matter who they are, as a doctor or a health professional, even a therapist or a healer, they don't always have your intentions completely. It's like almost, they don't always know what's right for you, and they don't always, sometimes they have good intentions, but they've just got lack of knowledge and awareness or whatever. But the reality is, you have to take self-responsibility of your health, and you cannot give your power over to other people, other medical professionals, other coaches, healers and therapists. Yes, sometimes you have to give over a little bit of, you're letting go a little bit to get help. If you really need a lot of help, sometimes you have to put trust. I had life-threatening sepsis, which was again caused by an injection that I was allergic to, and I told the dentist I shouldn't get. I was given an issue, had lots of other things happen, and it led to me ending up with sepsis, right? And I was at an emergency hospital 4 times, and nobody seemed to listen or recognise. I knew what I had. I knew there was a bone infection in my mouth. And I'm quite intuitive, and I know my body well, and that's took time. But the reality is, it's helping your client, first of all, understand how important it is, why they should be taking self-responsibility, why they should be owning their sovereignty. There's a deeper core issue going on, so sometimes it's just saying, well, do you not think that your health and what you put in your body and what you do every single day is your choices, your thing? So first of all, it's about getting that rapport going, getting them to question things, right? It's also about helping them understand, when they're working with you, that it's really important that they meet you at least halfway. Because if they're not meeting you halfway or even more, they're not genuinely wanting the help. They just want to be fixed, right? They don't want to do the work, right? Also, one big thing that you should watch out for is when someone else refers someone, they book you. It's not a good thing. You shouldn't really do that. So you should never take a booking that someone else has booked someone else in, because there's lots of things there. The person has not agreed to it. On a spiritual level, there's something that's not, the person has not agreed to it. In many ways, someone else is kind of forcing that on them, pushing them on it. I remember when I worked as a laser therapist, and it was you were working looking on the acupressure and acupuncture points, and it was for mostly smoke. The organisation, the business was a franchise, and it was mostly on like for smoking cessation, weight loss, and I got a lot of people who it was drug addiction, and for stress. That was what I specialised in for that business. And they would never accept a booking if someone else had made the booking for them. They made sure that the person was making the booking and they were agreeing to everything, because if that person was not ready, they were not fully committed, it was a waste of time and a waste of money. And it was also what they believed, which was really good practice, was it was not good for their reputation, because they wanted to have people come when they were ready. If you attract clients that are not committed, you'll get lots of failures and lots of people that don't want to help themselves, right? So you have to, very early on in the therapist and client relationship, is to check that they genuinely want to help themselves, right? And help them also overcome limited perceptions that about taking self-responsibility, because some of it can come from lack of trust, that they don't know how to make the right decisions. When we live in a society where we give our power over, in many ways people actually do start they stop making decisions. They just give their power over to someone else, and they're in a disempowered state, and they often don't know how to get that back, right? They're coming from a place of often maybe apathy. Sometimes, there can be mental health challenges, just this lack of confidence, lack of trust, lack of self-esteem and lack of self-love. So they can be the issues. And even though many of you that do a lot of the training that I offer are not psychotherapists, are not trained in the deeper workings of the mind and what goes on in the unconscious, building up just a nice rapport where you are trying to say, look, you can do it, we can take baby steps, we can take one step, but it's so important, you have to stress that it's so important that they are willing to start taking self-responsibility. And if they hit certain challenges, you can always refer them on. For example, if they do have a lot of unconscious beliefs that really get in the way, you can refer them on to get help with those blocks. If you don't do those extra, skills. The reality is that I find it quite sad, and I suppose in some ways I still get shocked, even though I shouldn't be, I still get shocked at how much responsibility people pass over to particularly medical professionals and even therapists. But again, I forget at times that people have not had my experiences. I mean, everything I'm ever given, I look into everything. I know that it's not encouraged now. I look at, and I know a lot of doctors, for example, have this issue about people who look up Google, right? And just looking up Google is not a good idea. I mean, a lot of people just think they'll get the right information in Google. You have to know where to look. People forget there's lots of people that write health and wellbeing sites, and the person behind that is often not an expert, it's a content writer. So that's one thing that I try and emphasise in my training. But because I had quite a few rare, I had this disease called Parry-Romberg's disease, and technically really nobody in the UK specialises in that, right? So there's not really anybody that knows much about it, to be honest, right? Anybody that does, it's something they're only seen an odd. I can't remember how many there's a handful of people perhaps that have the condition. It might be a lot more now, but one of the things when I discovered that I had was my left eyesight was starting to fail, and that there was something serious going on, was that I discovered that in, for example, the UK, the way that modern medicine was going was that most doctors only specialise in certain areas, right? If you fit in between those gaps, you get, no disrespect to a lot of really caring doctors out there, and some of them that I did meet, but you don't fit any criteria. So basically they don't know where to put you. And if you have all sorts of conditions or all sorts of symptoms that fall into different areas, so for example, I had everything from neurological, eye problems, jaw problems, right? So I had maxillofacial issues, I had eye issues, I had neurological issues, I had gut issues, I had upper gastro, lower gastro, I even had at times bladder issues, kidney issues, right? I had muscle and bone structural issues, right? So what happened there was that nobody would combine most of the things. There was only about maybe 2 doctors I ever met, and these doctors were very highly respected, well known, but they were older doctors. They didn't need to prove themselves. They had a certain level of authority, so they could make decisions that was normally not done within the NHS. But I only discovered out of 2 doctors who would look at the holistic perspective and say, okay, right, I see you've been saying, I remember one time, so I was going for gut, a lot of digestive issues I had internal bleeding all the time, couldn't keep food down. At the time also had a benign tumour in my breast, and had all sorts of things. This doctor took and went, right, okay, you've got this going on, you've got this going on. He says, so there's autoimmune, there's this. No one had ever done that with me. And what I realised was that there was no one there to save me. There was no one there to save me, right? In many ways, there was nobody to help me. Most of it I had to do on my own. And most people would be shocked what I had to do, and things that I should have been entitled to, and things I should have been given with the NHS that I didn't get because I fell through the gaps. Now, my journey was a painful journey, but it was also an empowering journey because it made me take different aspects of myself back. As someone who was highly sensitive, or still highly sensitive and empathic, I had given my power away over to so many people as a child and as a young person. And I'm still taking my power back in different ways. The reality is, when we're helping people, we are empowering them, right? We are helping move them from a state of disempowerment, whatever way that comes, and dis-ease, and we're moving them into empowerment and healing, self-healing. So no matter what we do, and even if you're an energy healer, right, or a physical healer, you are not, even though we call ourselves the healer and we do that for different reasons, we're not the healer. We are supporting the person to self-heal. And when you explain that to a client, it makes a difference. I always believe when you educate someone of the why, it gives them a greater motivation. If you can help them understand why they may struggle to take self-responsibility, that can help them too, because it's not about the blame game. You're not blaming them, you're not... and yeah, I can get triggered sometimes when I see people who just want everyone to do it, and they don't, they genuinely believe that everybody else should fix it. But I do also understand that there are other things going on, and what level of awareness they are. So the key thing is always education, building up a rapport that you make them feel safe and comfortable, but that you make it clear from the start that you're never the saviour, you're not the rescuer. Right, you're never. If you believe in some level that you're the rescuer and you're the healer, and a perspective that you heal, that's the ego, right? You're coming from a very unhealthy place, and that can be wounding. And even the rescuer, I have to be honest, that I've got to watch with the rescuer, because I can sometimes, want to help people when I push myself. I want to, it's like a trigger, and I've got to reel myself back and recognise there's a time and a place. Remember that the therapist in the healer's role, and even the coach's role, is to support that empowerment. And yes, there's certain parts of therapy work that we let the person be passive, and that's like escape, and it's given them so that they're sometimes there is times in a therapy session where we're allowing them to let go, and we're almost like helping taking the burden away, right, for a little bit, so they get a little bit of escape and support them. And part of relaxation involves that, but then it's about totally giving them the power back to do what they need to do to help them. If you don't do that, you are leaving the client in a very difficult situation. Now, I remember when I started, so one of the first modalities that I started using regularly was Reiki, and that's why I trained up in Reiki very early on. But one of the things that kind of I'm not saying upset me, but challenged me around Reiki was that there was this encouragement that you were again handing over responsibility to the person that was doing the healing. And for a variety of reasons, I went down lots of paths, and there was another reason why I started to move away from Reiki. But even though I use different types of healing and I bring it in and I think there's a place for it, we all sometimes have, we just need that extra help or support. If we are not taking self-responsibility, or our clients are not taking self-responsibility on a daily basis, that has to be addressed. And you have to be firm enough to recognise if there's a client that's not going to meet you halfway and just wants you to do it, that they're not a client. They're a victim, and you don't want to create codependency, and you don't want to keep them in that victimhood. And it's important to nip that in the bud and make it quite clear that you cannot continue if they do not take self-responsibility, or that they're willing to get help to take self-responsibility. So, we are here to help, but our role is not to keep people in victimhood. And there's part of, unfortunately, the way mainstream medicine is designed, and the way things have happened, and the way lots of things are manipulated in societies. And sometimes it's for other reasons to do with there's maybe other financial things going on and other tactics going on, and it leads to certain things. But I know, for me, I'm so glad that I took my power back, because there's so many situations that it could be even. There's a couple of situations when I wouldn't have been here if I hadn't acted the way that I did and not give over my power to other people. And some of those were medical professionals, because at the end of the day, no one is an expert in everything, and even experts get it wrong. Believe me, even experts get it wrong. And one of the things that I learned was these people are so busy that they do not have time to research everything. And for example, I'm not going to say the word, but there's a certain thing that's very, there's a lot of controversy at the moment about a certain thing. And I have friends who are medical professionals. I know people who are doctors, pharmacists, nurses, all sorts of different types of, in the medical field. And a lot of them are really shocked about their colleagues, about how much they do not know about certain things, what's in certain things, and things that they should know, they should be interested in. And that's an example where they are not taking responsibility. Yeah, they may be busy, they might be under pressure, but they are actually passing over the responsibility to above them, and that the pet above them is taking responsibility, passing over the responsibility to someone else. When the reality is that any medical practitioner, any healer, coach, therapist, his main role is to do no harm first. And part of that is also not creating codependency relationships. Okay, so thank you for watching. Have a wonderful day. Bye for now.